It is time to build ourselves an RTX 4090 i5 13600K gaming PC. Let's get started. Now, believe it or not, our build today is actually all geared around price to performance. Not with the RTX 4090, we're pretty much assuming that you want maximum gaming PC power here, but just because you're spending a lot on the RTX 4090, it doesn't mean the rest of the components need to be the absolute greatest thing since sliced bread. As you can see in our most recent video, that is located in the top right corner of your screen, the i5 13600K is one heck of a gaming CPU. So I thought it'd be a fantastic idea to show you what a more, dare I say, affordable RTX 4090 build would look like, so we can assess to see whether the performance is going to be basically the same and whether you can actually save money by going for a cheaper motherboard and cheaper CPU. The motherboard that we're using here is from MSI. This is their brand new Z790 Tomahawk, and this is still not the absolute cheapest motherboard, far from it. I mean, if you do want to save some money, I would actually recommend going for the previous gen, so probably B660, get a BIOS update in there, and then you can run the latest CPUs. Just make sure that you have one that has BIOS flashback with USB, so you don't need a CPU to actually be able to flash it and get that to work. If you do have a little bit more money though, the benefit of going with Z790 is not only that it is ready to use out the box with 13th gen, but then also that you do get a little bit more bandwidth. And you still get all the modern features, things like PCI Generation 5 for both a graphics card slot that will come useful a little bit later, maybe a year or so, and then of course PCI Generation 5 storage, and then loads of Gen 4 storage as well, and then plentiful I/O on the side, including Wi-Fi. Oh, future markers here. We have PCI Generation 5 on this top slot, but not on the SSDs. If previous marker said we did, he's a liar. Crucially though, the main difference between this and a higher-end Intel motherboard, or perhaps one from Ryzen AM5, is the fact that this actually supports DDR4, not DDR5 memory. And this is great because it means the motherboard itself is a little bit less expensive, then also you can get less expensive DDR4, or dare I say even use the existing RAM you already have, carry it forward. And as we already know, the differences between DDR4 and 5 for gaming are very minuscule, but this is something that we're going to be testing with a 4090 probably next week. Get subscribed so you don't miss it. I'm doing the top right hand corner thing, but there's nothing up there today. The RAM that I had planned to use was from Corsair, this Vengeance RGB Pro SL, but I've just noticed that it is a 3200 MHz kit. And I don't feel comfortable using that, so I'm going to leave that on the side and then grab something else. This is a kit from XPG. I've used it loads of times on the channel. This is the D60G. It is actually a pretty cool looking stick of RAM, or set of RAM. We have 2 sticks for a total of 16 running at 3600 MHz. And of course you can use 32 gig. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, but if you're trying to save yourself some money, it's a solid way of doing it because it is the easiest upgrade in the world to make, as you literally just add 2 more sticks in, re-enable XMP, and bang, you are done. Let's move on to our main event though, our i5 CPU, the 13600K, and this actually has a total of 6 performance cores, 8 efficiency, for quick maths, a total of 14. And that in itself would be very impressive, but they've actually upped the clock speeds and the IPC has improved. I think you've got more cache this time around. And obviously these things are great for marketing, but the only thing that actually matters to me is gaming performance. And fortunately, the performance of this has improved massively to the point where this is pretty much the, well, 3rd best gaming CPU, I suppose. If you grab the i7, that's also a very strong option. But obviously that is more expensive and it is going to come down to the sort of games that you want to play and how CPU bottlenecked you are going to be. If you're playing at 1440p, then I would probably recommend going for the i7. But this is going to have more or less the same sort of performance as the i7 and the i9. I mean, at 4K, I think we saw 6 or 7 FPS average difference across all games. That is very impressive. But it is very easy to install, as you see here. Make sure it's insecure, otherwise you'll have a repeat of the last video. Oh, Cole, don't show it. True stories, because I've just brushed. How did that happen? Why are you so mean to me? And then last, but certainly not least, we're going to grab a brand new SSD. And this one is actually from Samsung. This is a PCI Gen 4 drive. This is the 990 Pro. We have read speeds up to 7,450 megabytes a second. Obviously, it is going to depend on the exact capacity that you want to go for. I'd say 1 terabyte is probably the right amount for most people, but if you are spending a little bit more, then getting 2 terabytes is going to give you a little bit more longevity. But something I don't think I've really ever mentioned before that probably should be mentioned is the fact that I would actually let your internet speed dictate the capacity of SSD, because in PC Centric Studios, we've got gigabit, which is great. So I can just sort of delete stuff and reinstall it as and when. So my living room PC only has a 512 gig SSD in it, and it's fine. But obviously, if you're rocking off of like 50 meg, then you don't want to be downloading those games time and time again. But we'll remove the heatsink and then take this little protective cover off the thermal material. We'll pick up our 990 Pro and we will insert this into the top slot. Heat shield can go back on, screwy, screwy, screwy. And then we have our completed motherboard combination. Or at least that's what I would have said last week, but as we know, it went wrong. Hello? Who's this? Oh, it's Sonos, the proud sponsor of today's video. And when it comes to gaming, audio is something that is definitely very easy to overlook, but do so at your peril because it is so important and it honestly allows your game to go from something that's pretty nice looking to something you can properly feel. This right here is called the Sonos Ray, and this is probably my favorite soundbar at the moment. I've been using this exact one downstairs for the last 3 or 4 months. If you want to go for something a little bit bigger, you can step up to this. This is the Beam Gen 2. It has Google Assistant in it, so you can talk to it. Do you like me?
Being helpful to you is the best part of my day.
But for me, the party really gets started when you feed this a Dolby Atmos signal, as you've got extra speakers in this that sort of creates like a 3D space around you, so you can hear effects that are coming left, right, center. But best of all, both of these systems are fully expandable. You can add rear speakers with some Sonos Ones, or you can grab the brand new Sub Mini to add a load more bass to your setup, which is perfect if you want to watch movies, play your video games, and be able to feel every footstep or every explosion. It's incredibly easy to get started. Just hit the link in the description to learn everything you need to learn. Thank you, Sonos, for sponsoring today's video. So yes, this is a channel that learns from its mistakes, and today we're going to install our CPU cooler backplate before we put the motherboard into the case. Why, Fractal, why? What's the point of having a cutout if it doesn't cover the blooming socket? Why? And the cooler that we've got here is from NZXT. This is the Kraken X53 RGB. And I've been using NZXT coolers for literally years. I've always been really happy with them, actually. I guess pricing isn't always the best, but there are definitely deals to be had. And this one is slightly cheaper than the ones that have the full screen, so you can put GIFs and get CPU thermals and things on there. But let's be honest, most people probably don't actually need that. What you need is a very reliable cooler that looks cool and probably doesn't cost your third leg? Ooh, no, that sounds weird. Because we've already given up 2 for the rest of the computer. That was the joke there. I seem to have chosen a white cooler here. I would say on purpose, but that is by mistake. But we're going to use it and see what happens. It is definitely worth noting that depending on when you bought your Kraken X53, you may or may not get this 1700 adapter bracket. Mine's been sitting on the shelf for a while, so it didn't come with one as standard. But I will double check this, but I believe if you buy one and get a recently made one, it should support this socket out of the box. If not, it's not the end of the world. You just have to go on the NZXT website and request one of these 1700 mounting kits. But regardless, it is going to be very easy to install. You just grab this little plate and then push all of these standoffs through the holes on the back of the board. Give it a spin round and then use these posts just to secure the whole thing into place. Make sure they're all nice and tight, and then your motherboard is complete, ready to go in our chassis. I realise at this stage I haven't actually told you the story of what went down earlier today. That was pretty disgusting, but it probably is a good listen, but let me explain about this case and then we go from there. This is actually one from Antec, and this is pretty much nailing the theme on the head, whereby it's a very mid-range case. It's not got the absolute fanciest features in the world, but you still have tempered glass, and importantly for me, mesh and then RGB fans on the front, so it is going to look fabulous. You've got this GPU support bracket that's definitely going to come in handy with an RTX 4090, but then I think it's just an all-round, very sensible case. It looks good, it's got brilliant airflow, and it's not going to cost you, well, I'm not going to go on fourth legs now, that's just getting weird. It's not going to cost you an absolutely extortionate amount of money, because the whole point of this build is to say if you really focus in and get something like an expensive GPU and then everything else you sort of cut back to, I guess, the minimum to maintain that brilliant PC gaming experience, then you can actually get quite a lot for your money. It's all about prioritizing certain components and knowing what corners to cut. Case is definitely something where you can cut a few corners. I realise at this stage I haven't actually told you what this case is called, but fortunately for us, they've written the name of it on the back of this box. It's the DP503, and I think it costs around about £85 at the time of filming. But as we get this case and lie it down flat and insert our motherboard, I will tell you about the promised story. So, for context, my editor, lovely Carl, has been working away, I think over the previous weekend, so he's been off today, lucky him, and we went for a dog walk this morning. And I'm thinking, well, it might get a little bit muddy. The car itself is very clean, but I've got like a boot liner in there, so it's not the end of the world. I was not prepared for what happened, because poor old Ajax is a little bit of a nervous dog, and he seemed to get riled up a little bit when like a golden retriever off lead was harassing him. But we got past that bit, and then eventually we got to an area where it was safe to let him off, and we did. And he rewarded us within about 8.5 seconds of finding a massive cow turd that was, all right, that big, probably about that high as well, and then proceeded to do the old roly-roly in it. And he's a white dog, and he was black, he was brown, and he was yellow. How is that even that colour? He stunk. At this point, I'm thinking, what on earth do we do? Because he's got to get back in the car, and then the car's going to get dirty. It's going to forever smell. So I thought, let's find like a pond or something. Nothing deep, don't worry, he can swim. And we're encouraging him to go in. But there wasn't really anything deep enough. It was more like a very large stream / puddle type thing. And then he didn't really want to go in there. We were encouraging him. He started running around everywhere, jumping up, shaking, because he did get a little bit wet, and then all of this brown yellowy water is going everywhere. Should have filmed it, shouldn't I? Should have filmed it. Spraying a load of water at him, just trying to cover him in as much dirty but still cleaner water than what he was currently covered in. And it did help a bit, but the end result was still the same, which was a long drive home with quite a whiff. Anyway, back on topic, our motherboard has been installed. I'm really liking the jet black theme that we've got going on here, and I'm very conscious that the cooler we have was white. But in my defense, on the box, this is very much a black cooler. I missed the bit that says white on the top. So let's have a look at the damage. Is this going to look too weird? I wouldn't really recommend it unless you're using white cables or something and you're trying to sort of focus in on that theme. I'm not actually convinced myself, so as we've already changed one component, let's change another. Look, I acknowledge this probably isn't the best look in the world. It makes me appear disorganized, but anyone that knows me will tell you I am massively disorganized. And it does also show that if you do buy a white one, because maybe you could get it cheap, what it would look like in your black case, and I wouldn't do it, personally. White radiator, no. This is the cooler we were talking about earlier, actually, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend this for everybody because you are spending extra money, and again, I'd rather personally focus it on maybe a better processor or a better graphics card. But if you want your PC to literally look the bee's knees, then having one of these fancy coolers that does have a display on the front is definitely a way to make your PC look just incredible. It uses the exact same mounting procedure as the previous cooler though, so again, get the 1700 mounting kit if you don't get one in the box. Something I'm not a huge fan of though is the fact that these fans aren't actually RGB, whereas the ones on the cheaper cooler actually are. It doesn't really matter, but obviously if you want a full matching set of NZXT fans, that's going to cost you quite a lot of money. We screw our fans in so they're blowing into the radiator and with the cables sticking out the back. The clearance is actually quite tight at the top here, so I'd probably recommend that you grab a 360 or 240, as using 140 fans just means you have a little bit more width. So on this top bit of the motherboard, it is very tight. It will work, but it's a little bit uncomfortable. And because the clearance at the top is going to be quite tight, we're going to put our thinking caps on and grab our power supply. This is one from Fractal. It is the Ion Plus 2 Platinum 850 watts. You can go for something a little bit cheaper than this, but don't skimp out on the wattage. 850 is literally the minimum for an RTX 4090 for good reason. This is a fully modular power supply, so all of the cables are separate. You don't need to plug them in straight away. And the reason that we're actually grabbing this now is because I do want to plug these two CPU cables up here at the top now, then put the radiator in, as it's quite difficult to access these later. And if you put the radiator in only to take it out, you're going to say the famous PC-centric words, I hate radiators. I hate radiators. And yet I seem to use them every single time. Oh yeah, the dog's outside. I'm sorry, boy. Do you want to come in now? I'm sorry, boy. We were out there with all the scary rabbits. So grab the cables that say CPU on them and then just plug these at the top. Then you can just fold them through the back and then allowing them to dangle around the side where we will cable manage and plug them in a little bit later. We can now go back to our cooler and grab all of these fan cables, because again, it's going to be a little bit easier if we plug in our master CPU now. Feed all of these cables around the back, Then we can pick up our big boy radiator. Give it just a little bit of force so you can actually get one of these screws in. Told you it was tight. I wasn't lying. I'm not gonna say it. I'm not gonna say it. I refuse to say it today. Well, we got there in the end. Just the 2 fan cables to manage the other side, and you can now see what I was talking about. Trying to get up here would be very, very difficult. Because I've already used this cooler, I need to grab some thermal paste and put some on top of the CPU. Nice little line like that should do fine. Then you can pick your pump head up, drape this over those screws, then grab the big thumb screws, pop them over the top, tighten it up with a screwdriver. Then you can grab the power connector and all of the controllery cables and just connect this here at the top. Then the micro USB control cable. Micro USB, this is old hat. Corsair's is USB-C. Then comes the little bit more fiddly bits, which is actually plugging in all of the cables. Obviously all of the cooler stuff should be pretty straightforward as they give you the exact amount. The SATA power connection, so obviously give it some juice. And then you've got this little addressable RGB for NZXT Hue if you want to add like an RGB strip or something. And then of course that USB that should plug in just down here at the bottom. You can then also plug in your case connections. So you've got USB Type-C for the front panel here. Just above that, you've got your USB 3. Above that, you've got your front panel fans that are already connected to a splitter, so just one to connect up here. And then next to that, you've got your addressable 3-pin RGB. I mean, I say we have a fan splitter, it's actually this little fan control hub look, so you can add more fans and more addressable RGB. And this is something you don't see on even more expensive cases, yet I think this should be standard, it's great. Expandability, neat and tidy, happy days. Then you've got the really fiddly connectors for your power button and any LEDs and a reset switch. They all plug in down here at the bottom right. On an MSI board, it's called JFP1. Then last but certainly not least, you've got your HD audio, which is the bottom left. Now we can actually insert our power supply, so we're going to need the rest of the cables. Don't you worry, they're all labeled. It's very self-explanatory, I promise. This case uses a quick release insert, which is quite nice. You just need to attach this to your PSG. You can now reunite this with those cables from earlier. Plug them in down the bottom and then slide the baby in. We'll grab our very large ATX and feed this through at the top. You can then plug this into the very large hole at the top. You will need a total of 2 SATA connections, one for the case RGB and then one for the NZXT hub. And then finally, you have these bulky things, the PCIe power connections that usually you would plug straight into the graphics card. But sadly, today is not that day. Because allow me to introduce you to the worst thing about the RTX 4090. And this bit sickens me because I haven't actually used these yet because they're just disgusting. I mean, look at them. Look at this adapter. Regardless of which 4090 you go for, you're going to need some sort of adapter, or you're going to need to grab an alternative power supply cable that I believe Fractal should supply if you want to buy one of them. But for today's video, I want to see what the adapter looks like. But let's get this absolutely beastly GPU installed. It is going to take up 3 slots, so you better get unscrewing. And then you can pick up your thing of beauty, your RTX 4090. Give it a push. And boom! Don't forget, by the way, that we do have this GPU sag bracket down here at the bottom, just to give ourselves a little bit of a boost as well. But either way, screw it till it's safe and secure. Plug your horrible alien adapter in to those PCIe connections. Feed the whole unit through this little hole. Oh God, this is gonna look bad. It's gonna look bad. Why, NVIDIA? At least give us a longer adapter. Why do you do this? But anyway, here it is. We plug it in. And that could be worse. Our hopefully completed i5 4090 PC. 4K monitor, keyboard, mouse mat, mouse, power, and then last but certainly not least, a copy of Windows 11 on a flash drive that I burnt from an ISO yesterday. Wish us luck, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go. We have noise. We have lights. Oh, it thought about it, it thought about it. Go on, go on. Is that a line? Is that a line? Come on. Yes! That's an MSI logo. Have they updated it? Oh, unsupported processor. I don't understand. What do you mean unsupported processor? So we're in the BIOS. Here is our i5 13600K. That's all handy dandy, not a problem. Let's try Windows 10. I honestly don't know what's going to happen. It could be that we need a BIOS update maybe, because this seems to work. What's that all about? Why? Well, okay, Windows 10 works, so if you're having problems, I would update the BIOS. That would be the first thing I'd do and see if that helps something. Make sure TPM is actually enabled within the BIOS itself, but it should be on this by default. And if all else fails, just try Windows 10. Bizarre. We are here, we are all set up, and we're ready to play some games. And our first title is actually brand new for the channel. This is Spider-Man, right at the start of the game. This is running at 4K max settings with everything turned up, including the ray tracing with all of the view distances to the max. Like, this is a seriously intense title. It looks absolutely fantastic. Yet, as you can see, we're easily getting way over 60 FPS with an average of around about 90 or so. I mean, look at the rays, look. It's reflecting what we're seeing behind us. I mean, it sounds like I'm joking, but that is seriously cool tech. However, if you look closely at the frame rate counter, you'll see that our GPU utilization is not actually at 98 or 100%. It's sadly only about 78, 80%. This is quite good timing actually. We've jumped into a cutscene. So let's pause it right here at around about 98 FPS and 86% utilization. And we'll turn on DLSS 3.0 frame generation. If you're using Windows 10, you do have to make sure that GPU Advanced Scheduling is turned on. So we'll turn this on, we'll hit apply, and our frame rate should immediately increase to around about 160, 150 FPS. It's really cool tech the way this works. This is absolutely crazy, and it of course means that if you are running a 4K 120Hz monitor like we have here, then you're able to fully saturate it and be able to see all of those extra frames. Moving on though, we have the most popular ray tracing title that you guys are always asking about. This is Cyberpunk 2077. This is running the Psycho presets, not the brand new, currently unreleased one that will be coming very shortly. And this is actually running with DLSS frame generation on, which is why you can see an absolutely massive frame rate at the top right corner of your screen of 115 FPS. 115 FPS in Cyberpunk running on an i5. This is exactly why I say it is worth considering your options when choosing a CPU, because while you definitely are going to have difficulties in certain titles like Spider-Man, if you're still able to get 4K 120 FPS in every single game that you're going to play, why spend more on a processor that you're not really going to need? So, where to? I realize we've been running all of these tests with the side panel off, so you can actually see what's inside, but that's not a fair test. So let's whack this on. We do the peel. Oh yeah, that's good. And then I think we'll actually take this opportunity to talk about the looks of the system. And I think this is a great little black box, I really do. I would definitely strongly advise that you do put a fan at the back, because it just looks a little bit odd if I'm honest, and it will help to get some of that extra heat out of your system. But the way it's been designed is going to work very nicely, because all of the fans are going to bring some lovely air in from the front, and then both the graphics card and the CPU cooler are going to vent that up out of the top of the chassis. And I think the whole thing is just a nice compromise really. It's not the most premium case in the world, but I think it looks good, it's a nice size, and if it can accommodate all of your hardware, then what's to complain about? But let's press on to our next title, and one that is very, very CPU dependent, Planet Zoo. And here we are, look. I don't actually think I've seen this game look as good as it has. It is ridiculously sharp, and it's running at a massive 120 FPS. However, as expected, we're barely using any of this RTX 4090, because we are seeing CPU bottlenecks of around about 30% or so. It's very easy to spot if your GPU utilization isn't at 98, then you're getting some sort of bottleneck, and we're getting about 64 here. Again though, I don't think this is a particularly big issue, because why would you need to play Planet Zoo at an even higher frame rate? Just be aware that there are going to be certain titles with the 4090 that an i5 isn't necessarily going to be enough, but it is worth remembering that the i9 is still going to be bottlenecked in this title. It's not like you can choose between it being bottlenecked and not. It's just going to be not quite so bad. You'll get probably an extra, what, 10 FPS maybe? Let's have a close-up. Oh, look at that! This is for Thea. It's a baboon, I think. Is that a baboon? What is that? She's probably shouting at the screen now. It's a mandrill! But enough mucking about. It's time for the Warzone. Except it's not, because today we're going to play some Overwatch 2. Don't worry if you do want to see some RTX 4090 Warzone gameplay though, because I've already made this video. You can find it in the top right hand corner of your screen, where you can watch it on an equivalent Ryzen processor, or if you do just want to see the straight benchmarks of Warzone, you can find that video also in the top right hand corner of your screen, where we see a full review of all of these chips. I got you covered. Settings wise, we're going to play this at Ultra and at 4K. And we're going to look at our frame rate, and you can see we're getting about 340 FPS, which doesn't sound that impressive until you remember this is at 4K resolution without any upscaling, no FSR, anything like that. And we're getting around about 93% GPU utilization, so maybe you could get an extra 10, 15 FPS more on the i9. But again, is it really going to matter? Do you need more than 340 anyway at 4K? I mean, this monitor's 120 Hz and the fastest ones you can get are 160, so I don't really think you're going to be playing this game at 4K anyway. So let's turn this down to 1440p and see what happens. Now granted, this is a slightly different map because I was removed for being AFK because I was too busy talking to you guys, but we are still seeing a massive increase. We're now getting 550 FPS at 1440p. That's incredible. Maybe we're not actually CPU bottlenecked at all. Oh, that didn't work. That did nothing. That did nothing. Let me out. Let me out. Go on, go on, go on. That was a mistake. You shouldn't have gone for me. This is a good opportunity to talk about noise levels, though. Because this is a really quiet PC. You're not generating as much heat because you don't have an i7 or i9. And then the 4090 just runs pretty chill, really. All round, it's a success. So there we are, the i5 RTX 4090 gaming PC build. I think all round it is a brilliant little gaming PC. Obviously, if you do have a bit more to spend, then maybe getting the i7 is probably what I'd recommend. But depending on the games that you play, I think we've proved that even if you are losing out on potential FPS, it's not FPS that's really going to matter anyway. So I'd absolutely love to hear your thoughts on this. What do you make of this PC, the i5, the 4090? Are you buying one? Are you worried about the price, the 16-pin connector? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. Absolutely smash the like button if you've enjoyed this video, get yourself subscribed, and of course, as always, if you do want to check out current pricing on any of the components that are in this PC, you can find them listed down below with my Amazon affiliate links. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll catch you in the next one.